every kid's different, except that their life's not your life. Just encourage them, give them the resources, whatever you can to help them on their journey. They're going to miss out. Like I did, I had more than my fair share of failures. The reason I became and ended up where I am today is because my parents didn't put me in a box. They allowed me to go and find out. And because of that, I've ended up in a pretty good place.
Aloha and welcome back to the Degree Free Podcast. It's Hannah. I'm filling in for Ryan and myself this week. I had just had a great call with Bentley Hensel, who is a senior data and DevOps engineer at a company called Civic Action. He has a lot of interesting things to say about his journey. One, what he was able to do. He walked from Mexico to Canada. Instead of buying a college degree, he worked for various political consulting firms, learned a ton about marketing, digital marketing, and client relations. And after that, because he had so much experience in analytics and campaign work, one of the most interesting things he said was that political campaigns are essentially Fortune 500 companies that are designed to go bankrupt in 90 days. And so because of that, it's very evident throughout his story that he learned a ton working in that environment. His view on tech and the tech stack and how to learn is really useful. And then he was able to teach himself a wide variety of skills that helped him get into his current role as a senior data and DevOps engineer. He also gives some really valuable advice to parents and young adults at the end. And we may definitely be having Bentley back on soon. He's also running for Congress, which he does mention at the end, as an independent. And it's interesting to hear his platform as he's running on government transparency. And once you hear his story, you'll understand why he comes from that angle. And I think that it's a really good interview. He has a great story that goes all over the place and has many twists and turns. And he really talks about how your 20s are such a valuable time to experiment and try things and learn really, really hard things and then find your fit. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Bentley Hensel. Welcome back to the Degree Free Podcast. I have Bentley Hensel here. He is a senior data and DevOps engineer at a big company. He is here to talk about his degree-free experience, how he got to his current role in tech via self-teaching, self-education through a path that people always told him he would not be able to take. So Bentley, excited to have you here to share your wisdom, to share your experience.
Thanks for having me, Anna. I appreciate it. And I'm a senior data and DevOps engineer at an awesome company called Civic Actions, where we do things like Medicare.gov and VA.gov and a lot of other systems that matter, which is a great feeling. But I built my career on practical skills and real world solutions, all without a college degree. I've been in tech, politics, brief stint in the Navy, and I've navigated a lot of roles that have emphasized innovation and actual problem solving as opposed to just the perception of problem solving. So passionate about technology and using efficient systems to solve actual real world impactful and meaningful problems. So excited to talk about how I got here and provide guidance to anyone else who's kind of interested in following a similar path.
Before we got online, we were actually having a good discussion where you mentioned some of your past, and I think I'd like to loop back to that so everybody can understand where you came from and how we got here to the point where you're a degree-free senior data and DevOps engineer. So what happened when you were 17, right before you graduated high school? What was your trajectory? What did you think you were going to do? How were you feeling?
I started high school thinking that I wanted to be a research pathologist. I had a little benign-ish cancer thing when I was a kid, and that was something I was like, okay, that is an admirable job. Then I was like, okay, maybe general surgeon. And then my kind of late junior, early senior year, this was 2010, when I graduated in 2010, and the world of the economy had just tanked and a few things. So I was inspired by a guy named, he's passed away now, but T-Ben Pickens, where he was an oil guy who basically got rid of all that and put in wind farms. And it was an innovative thing at the time. He was basically, I was like, okay, I'm going to go become an electrical engineer. And I'm going to live off, I was in Alexandria, Louisiana, and I'm going to live off the coast of Texas at Corpus Christi. And I'm going to put in big offshore wind farms. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And I was always the kind of person, especially in high school, who I was kind of petty. Still am a little bit. Still to this day, I have never responded well to when people say, oh, you can't do that. Or, oh, you have to have this certain thing to achieve this goal. My guidance counselor told me that I would never achieve anything in my life, and there's no way that I would achieve this goal. Pretty much right when I graduated, I still thought I was going to go into electrical engineering.
Hey there, I hope that you're loving today's conversation. At Degree Free, we want to help as many people as we can thrive and succeed without needing a college degree. Having these guests on that share their experiences so that you can learn from their stories and their mistakes is one of the ways that we do that. Genuinely, I'm just grateful that these guests take the time to come on and share their wisdom. And if you're getting value out of this conversation, or you've listened to 2, 3, or 4 plus episodes, I have one quick ask. Please take a moment right now to review this podcast on whatever platform you're tuning in on. With your review, you're not just supporting us, but you're amplifying the voices of every guest we bring on and ultimately helping more people thrive degree free. Thank you for doing that right now and for being such an important part of Degree Free.
But I realized that to get into Louisiana Tech, the university, eventually I did a year there, but then realized that was not what I wanted to do. But I realized that I didn't need certain courses. So I went to a Catholic high school in Louisiana, and you don't need religion class to get your diploma. They say you do, but you actually don't, because I went through the guidelines. So I decided, no, I'm not going to get, so I intentionally failed the class just to spite some other leaders in the school and did my little stint at Louisiana Tech, and that was not for me. One thing in particular, which has gotten easier these past few years, but back then it was not something you could openly talk about. The fun way I like to say it is I'm pretty severe on the ADHD spectrum, but then also have a sprinkling of autism. And that was not something you could really broadcast in the 2010s. Not the case today, thankfully. But when I went, so that was just not for me. I was in, go ahead, sorry, yeah. And then I jumped and had a whole other shift, but that's not who I am today.
I don't want to interrupt, but I do have a question I want to ask you about that, because I had such an interesting time trying to explain to parents that just because your child is on an IEP or something like that, or struggled with academic schooling, does not mean they cannot learn really specific or very tough skills, even complex mathematics. And as we know from you, data and DevOps. It's something that I really want to make clear to the audience, that just because your child is not fitting into a specific box of learning, that for most people is actually not a good way to learn. It does not mean that your child is not smart. It doesn't even mean that your child's not academic, actually. What it means is that they don't learn well in that version of academics. And so that's something that I feel is really important, because it's so interesting for you to say that you struggled in college, but clearly you don't struggle to learn complex concepts. So what I want to know now is that, one, how did your family feel about you breaking out of college? And then 2, what did you do afterwards?
So my sophomore, I decided not to do cross country. He was also my math teacher, and it didn't end well for that math course. So I technically failed 1 year of high school math. I took it again, and it was fine. I got to get past all that. But now I spend way more time than I'd like to admit on AI models and things. And my math's never wrong to a lot of parents, just because they're not necessarily doing great in school on something. And this is a big problem in college. Why? If someone wants me to do something, don't ask me, oh, you have to do this. Tell me why you want it done. Because if I don't see a motivation, why do I need to learn like logarithms? I know why it's important now, but at the time they never told me. And then so I was never motivated. So just because they're not necessarily doing great in their teenage years does not mean they can't find the motivation in life once they kind of figure out who they are. But also on how my parents respond, I was very fortunate that my parents were kind of realized from an early age that it's best to don't ever pull Bentley and try to force him to do something that he's not motivated, because that is never going to end well. The best thing is they're like an energizer. You just point him where he needs to go and he'll figure out how to get there, especially with just the way my personality and the way I see the world is. Fitting me into a box is the best way for me to fail at something. So I was fortunate. They were not super stoked. I mean, my dad, he's a dentist, and he had a full ride, went to SMU for swimming, and then went to UT for dental school, and had a whole bunch of other bonus degrees for funsies. My mom was a landscape architect from LSU, so she was on the 7-year plan. She actually victory laps, as she liked to say. Ag mechanization was hers pretty much all the way back to early 1900s. Men and women, like grandparents, grandmas, all that, both had college degrees. And I am the first one, not to both my sisters. They've passed the bar in law school, but not me. They weren't super stoked at the same time. I think they realized early on just let Bentley be Bentley.
Well, how do they feel now with where you're at and your job? And I'm sure they're very proud of you. Are they surprised?
Early on, yes. So one of the first big job I had, I was working in Boston for a presidential campaign. I was 19 when I got that job, and technically an internship. And then it turned into a job where I was paid no money. My dad was questioning, like, okay, is this real? Is he just putting me on here? But him and my sister flew up to Boston and they saw me, oh, okay, here's the Secret Service checkpoint and here's all of these barricades that he can go through, and introducing me to all my coworkers and stuff. They trusted me, but at the same time, this kid's like barely 20 years old. Is he putting this on? College didn't work out for him. And ever since then, been like, is this the right? Like, are you okay? But they've never not been supportive. And honestly, that's a big reason why I got to where I am today, because I had that baseline support, someone that I can go to. And even though they may not have understood what I was doing, they still encouraged me to find out for myself.
So you graduated and then you ended up working for the presidential campaign. So how did you get from that to data and DevOps engineering?
Best piece of advice I ever got is your 20s are your time to mess up. You really can't unremake yourself. So graduated high school, went to Louisiana Tech for electrical engineering. After a year, that was not what I wanted to do. So I left and then got guilt tripped to take some local classes at Louisiana Tech, Alexandria. I felt so stifled. But then at the time, I got a job for a governor's race, knocking on doors and walking miles every day. Loved it. Then did another local race after that. And then I was persistent and said, and I'm godly about emails to this presidential campaign thing, I want to work.
Persistence is an underrated skill, though. I say that all the time. I've done that where I've applied to a job 17 times. And the end of it, though, is they hired me. You got to give in at some point. Or they'll tell you, stop, we're not going to hire you. They'll just tell you eventually.
They did. I still didn't care.
Yeah, and you just keep going.
I just kept how much and motivated and just give it to them. I moved up to Boston in early January. I'm from Louisiana. I did not know what cold was.
It's freezing up there. The only way they stay warm is to go and Dunkin' Donuts. That's the only way.
But yeah, I was making no money in Boston, but I figured out a way. I did that, left the campaign. I wanted to still serve my country, so I took a few months off and did a lot of work. I helped with a little medical device startup for a year. Prepping, did the Navy for a bit, loved it, but then they found out I had asthma and decided thanks, but no thanks after I got in, which is frustrating.
Oh, so you got in and then they said, no, I'm sorry, you didn't pass the health screening. Oh, no.
With 1 day short of the 6 months active duty mark, which is super frustrating because that's officially when you get veteran status. But it's the Navy.
Sure, them's the rules.
Yep. So left there, I went back into politics. I was a campaign manager for the attorney's race, won a race that shouldn't have been winnable with Pandora Internet Radio, audio ads for local political campaigns. I was the first one to ever do it. In 2014, spoke at a panel in New Orleans for the American Association of Political, super niche trade group, but incredibly fun about it. And another lady on the panel, she was Becky Donatelli, who was the president of a company called Campaign Solutions. And after that panel, she was like, you're going to come work for me because of what I said. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to. But she's like, go on your mountain man hike first. Because as a thank you pretty much for winning the VA's race, I was given some money. And he's like, go do something you'll do again. So I walked from Mexico to Canada.
What? I'll roll this back a minute. There's so much going on here. Okay, so first of all, political consultants, right? I want to zoom in on this a little bit because it's kind of foreshadowing to later in your story when you get into data. And this is my perception. So obviously you can correct me because you know, but political consulting from an objective standpoint, not a right versus left, all these kind of things, but just as a job, it's all marketing, it's all data. Image consulting, brand representation, it's PR, it's crisis management. And so there's a lot underneath that umbrella. When you were starting to be in that crowd, did you start to see threads that you were eventually going to pull on that were going to lead you to the job you're in now?
And yeah, a big reason that my life went the way it did is whenever I was getting that first big political job, they said, which department do you want to be in? Digital, advanced, or war room, which is like media monitoring. And I was like, oh, digital sounds cool. I was 19. I had no idea. And it was kind of like happenstance that I probably would have fallen in there, but it's also a little bit terrifying when you're 19 years old and tweeting out for some of the most visible people in the country, and they trust you with that. And there's the industry, I have my own qualms with it.
Yeah, but like I said, I do as well. But I was trying to be objective because it is an interesting sphere of work. And there's a lot there because it's a complex system and there's a lot of money involved. And there's obviously a lot of power at stake. And so because of that, there's all these different jobs in it that teach transferable skills, which obviously it did because you ended up transferring your skills. So you were given some money and then you walked from Mexico to Canada.
Pacific Crest Trail.
And how old were you when you did this?
I was still pretty young, and it was amazing. I had always been a big fan of the outdoors, but he kind of gave me the option to go do that as a thank you for helping him achieve his life goal. Then the movie Wild came out, Reese Witherspoon. I was like, that sounds fun. And I was an Eagle Scout and a few other big fan of the outdoors. Within a month of deciding, I was dropped off on the Mexican-Canadian border and started walking.
Well, what's cool about that, though, is I think one of the things that I speak about a lot that I see very clearly evident right there is the fact that you had the freedom to do that because you didn't immediately have to turn around and get a job to service a student loan debt burden that you didn't have. And that's something that I'm trying to explain to people. Oh, well, what about the life experience? I'm sorry, but what about the life experience of doing that? That's crazy. That's so cool that you did that.
One of the things they say is memories are like things that you're kind of uncomfortable with. You don't really get to hide from that. And I'm not saying this out to everyone, but like all those awkward moments and things that you're like, wow, this was hard. That comes up a lot. You kind of think about it so much, you just burn it off. You're like, okay, I've thought about this for 6 days straight. I'm good. Even to now, it's a great mental technique I can do where something is, a little bit of adversity. I've figured out how to emotional health, so I put that on the side, but I can take that critique, put it in a box and just burn it and move on. But yeah, I get the life skills. It's a great conversation starter. If it's like, okay, yeah, weird fact about yourself. I walked across America, took 153 days. I did it by myself. And my dad actually was like, support, I paid for it, but like he got into helping ship me my food on the trail and all that. But yeah, that life-changing experience.
I would imagine so. And then so you come back from this vision quest, as I'll call it. And then after you get back from your vision quest, you were a different person, obviously, than you when you started. So after the trail, what brings us to where you are now? What did you do?
Took that job with the company in Old Town Alexandria. So I was moving from Alexandria, Louisiana to Alexandria, like Virginia's version. But then, yes, I did that. And I came on as officially in titles there were director of social media and client management. There was a lot there. I did not know what HTML and CSS was, but they did a lot of email marketing. So messages, donate today or the world's going to catch on fire. Writing that email and making sure they get in that inbox. So the company said, here's some courses on learning HTML and CSS. I had no idea. I was like, okay, great. From the political campaign before, I did more marketing and social media and advertising and analytics, not writing. I say the word code loosely there for HTML, but more or less, and learned PHP a little bit with the landing pages. So, click here to sign up petition. Well, those pages were PHP. And then started to get into a little bit of data. I was at a company that supported finding out. And if you have an idea, go and try to do it because political campaigns, especially presidentials, it's a Fortune 500 company run by 20-somethings. It's designed to go bankrupt in 90 days. So,
I've never heard anyone phrase it like that, but that's so true.
Yeah. So money, it's a weird concept, but ask for more.
Yeah, they have an expiration date. That's so wild.
If you have money in your account on election day and you lost, that's even worse than losing because, wow, you've held back. Weird concept to think about.
Super strange. Wow. I never really thought about it.
In that industry too, 70% of your money over the course of 4 months every 2 years. It's the ultimate feast and famine. So budgeting is beyond incredibly important. So I learned a decent bit there. And then I took another job with another kind of advocacy group almost 2 years later. Did ish well there, but I found out that there was some corruption and things going on. And I brought it up to my boss, who I did not realize was involved. Walked out of that job, and that was the first time I was ever fired, which was interesting. I was a digital strategist there. So a lot of marketing and figuring out how to get brands built.
Company politics is a real thing.
Yeah, it's a skill that if you're not careful, you can make or break your career. So then after that, I started my own company, first one, and we did political merchandise in stores. So basically, buy this bumper sticker today or the world's going to catch on fire. So I was the guy that managed the store.
I'm sensing a recurring theme.
Yeah, it's hellfire and brimstone is what brings in political. It works. Shipped a whole bunch of yard signs and had my company. Made $1 million, lost $1 million there, and did great and have some fantastic stories around that. But then shifted that company a little bit and started another one when I was kind of tired of politics. And that was, I bought a new warehouse in actually Waynesboro, Virginia in February of 2020 for shipping and importing items from overseas for commercial companies. And that all pretty much went up in smoke with COVID. Found some investors, shifted, rebuilt the warehouse, bought a semi-truck full of ethanol to make hand sanitizer.
What?
Yeah, I got an official FDA pharmaceutical manufacturing facility at a legal drug lab to make that.
That's crazy. How long did you do that for? How long was that able to be profitable?
About a year. And then I just realized that if I kept going at that, I wasn't going to make it. I was always hustling for it and did well, but like it was just not what I wanted to do. I figured my dad told me, Bentley, you're more excited about building inventory system than you are actually of doing manufacturing and things. So got rid of that company. And then a few months later, went back to a political marketing firm. Enjoyed it, but then leadership and I didn't quite agree on things. Company ended up going bankrupt a few months after I left. It's very unfortunate that y'all went y'all's own direction and then failed. Took time off, about 9 months, learned to sail, then got a job at my fantastic company now, Civic Actions, and was hired as a senior technical product manager. And then this past March, transitioned over to the internal IT and tools for senior data and DevOps engineer. And I told you, it was a lot.
Honestly, there's a lot of parallels between your experience and mine. I also had a ton of adventures. Not as cool as yours, though. Yours are something else, but that's how you learn. I completely agree with what you said earlier about this is the time to mess up. This is the time to try things. If you look at people that typically fall into something they really like, it happens later in their life because when you're young, you really just don't know. And that's why not buying a college degree right off the bat de-risks the situation, because I can see multiple points in your story where you were actually able to take breathing room to re-examine things and then go another direction because you didn't have debt weighing you down. That is very present throughout your story, that you had the freedom, the willingness to move, and the freedom of not having a lot of debt. That's so interesting. But what I'd like to know now is, what did you learn to go from product management into data engineering? It sounds like you've collected a stack of some of those things over the years. You had the digital marketing, which is all analytics. So that base was there. But then what did you learn to get the official switch?
I self-taught. I haven't had a bunch of training there. Google was my best friend for the technical people. Google's great, but you want to pay for your searches with a company called Kagi, Kagi. I'm just a huge Kagi fan, and it's the best thing in the world for searches. Stack Exchange, going on there and asking questions and getting told I'm a complete idiot, like every other question on there. Whenever I had my company, it's like I needed some cloud infrastructure. Or when I was working in politics, it's all fun and games until the AWS cloud bill comes. But there was a need to solve a problem, and I figured out how to do the skills. And in particular, we were talking a little bit before about some of the tools and things to learn, and everyone's different. But the way I figure out a new system, when there's a weird problem, what are we trying to accomplish here? They're like, let's ask Bentley. My kind of gift is taking chaos and figuring out a creative way to solve that problem. I learned by breaking it. I want to see your code, and I am an adamant opponent against anything that is not open source. If you're not supportive of open source software, I don't support you. I try not to use you, because the reason I got to where I am today is because I was able to go and use these tools when I couldn't afford it. I can't afford an Oracle license to learn data. I can't afford to go pay for Salesforce when I'm in my early 20s. I'm like, I mean, I could have, but I would have struggled to pay that. So one of some of the things, container, that's how I learned Docker, which is super kind of confusing and abstract concept, especially when you're starting. But as a DevOps engineer, if it's not Docker, I don't take it seriously. If it's not in a container, it doesn't really exist because I'm not deploying it.
The technical stuff is super complicated for a lot of people, and we're getting close to time. So what I want to do is I would like to ask you a few different things. One, what would you advise young people who are 16 to 20 years old to start learning now if they want to get to the type of job that you're in? If they want to go into DevOps, if they want to go into dev, how would you advise them to interview? What do they need to learn? And then how would you advise them to interview to showcase their skills? Those would be super actionable.
I will share with you a link to the slide deck that I made for my job at Civic Actions. Tell us about projects you did. I'll share that slide deck and you can share it out with people.
We'll link it in the show notes, everybody.
My advice, big reason that I've learned how to use a lot of systems is by trying it out. If you ever want a fun rabbit hole, the Google term is home lab, which my home lab, this is not such a humble brag, but I am about to cross the 500 terabyte mark at my home lab. When there's data, I probably have
it. For those of you listening, that's a lot of storage for data.
In my basement, I have a stack of computers about 4 feet tall, but they're not great. $300 Dell micros. But for anyone getting started, go buy a couple Raspberry Pis and go online and look at a company called Portainer. The CEO is super nice and the company is great. Basically what that is a visual interface for a lot of your coding tools. I could not figure out Docker with the command line. When I started out, the command line was very intimidating. Now I love it. I'm like, I don't want a web interface. I want its command line. But when I was starting out, I needed a visual representation of it. But Portainer's a visual Docker. You can do everything with it and deploy clusters, break it. And when the thing stops working, just reflash it and figure out what you're doing in your own life. Go deploy a ghost website and have your own blog. That's what I did for my website. And I learned a lot there. Another one for data is another great company called dbeaver. It's an open source tool. They have a free version. I pay for the enterprise and it's work with just more database support. But that's how I learned Postgre. That's how I learned MySQL. But it's another visual interface of databases. And I still use that today. For my day-to-day job, it's pinned on my taskbar because it's such a great tool to learn and break SQLite and all these other database engines, at least for me. It really helped get the concept of what a relational database is, which is, it's like spaghetti pretty much.
It's tough to understand.
Yeah. But those are the things that help me in particular. Awesome open source is another one. It's a fake. I'll send you links to some of these too. Fantastic GitHub thing where it's a bunch of awesome self-hosted actually, but it's a bunch of free open source self-hosted tools that you might need in your life. Run them and break them. You send them to your friends and family. That is a great way to motivate you to have a good back end, because when your grandmother texts you says this thing that she loves is not working anymore, you figure out real quick how to automate deployments and things.
That's a really practical idea. So basically build stuff and then send it to your elderly relatives or your mom and your dad and see if they can break it, because they are users. They will break it and then you'll go, oh shoot, I got to fix this. So if you could give one piece of advice to young adults 16 to 20 years old about how to self-educate, and then also one piece of advice to their parents to support them, what would you tell them?
Figure out, what do you enjoy spending your time on? I'm a huge nerd. I enjoy tech and data. I do that for fun. So you don't need a degree to go into. If it's talking to people, go into product management. Figure out what you genuinely enjoy and go and break it. Go in and find ways to interact and make that into your daily life and use that as an interview story with these big companies. The worst they can do is not hire you.
I feel like I should give you a degree-free hat because everybody's listening going, yeah, I know, you guys say that all the time. So that's perfect.
Every kid's different, except that their life's not your life. Just encourage them, give them the resources, whatever you can to help them on their journey. They're going to mess it up. Like I did. I had more than my fair share of failures. The reason I became and ended up where I am today is because my parents didn't put me in a box. They allowed me to go and find out, and because of that I've ended up in a pretty good place.
I'll say so. And then to wrap up, do you want to tell folks what you're doing today?
Still working my full-time job, fully remote, love it, but I got quite frustrated this past March. I wasn't super stoked about the way the country was and how things weren't happening. So I've been out of politics for a hot minute, and I'd saved up some money. I was going to go buy a sailboat and circumnavigate the world while working remote. In March, I decided that I'm frustrated and I need to do something. So I decided to run for the U.S. House of Representatives in Northern Virginia. I'm running as an independent, and my whole vibe is government transparency and revitalizing the entire government technology stack. And I feel like a lot of my life's kind of led me to this point. We'll see what happens in November. No college degree and running for Congress, and I'm already the first to instantly disclose all my donations. A little tax platform I built. No one did it before because I wasn't in a box. No one said, oh, you can't do that. I've fought with the FEC on it a little bit, and they agreed that I could do it. But I think not having a lot of my horizons chopped off by going in and having a college professor say this is not the way allowed me to get DevOps engineer running for Congress. And yeah, where most of my issues, either people love it or they want to throw me in a burning pit of sulfur. They appreciate the thought put into it. So if you don't limit yourself with horizons and you don't push yourself into a box and, like I said, commit yourself to tens, hundreds, in some cases, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, gives you kind of the flexibility to figure out who you are. And then once you figure that out, go into something you love.
Yeah, I think I can't see a better place to end on than that. This was a great episode, folks. If you like this, Bentley, where can people find you if they want to follow you or support your campaign as you're running for government transparency as an independent and working while you do so, which they should all do anyway?
I've regrettably not been as active on social as I should be, but yeah, my personal website is bentleyhensel.com, and then the campaign is henselforcongress.com. And yeah, if there's anyone has questions, or I'm also on LinkedIn and all the other sites, but I'm also glad to talk to people if they have questions. I'm glad to help or provide. I've got a lot of connections with, especially the open source community and things. So if people are curious about how I got here and questions about how, I'm glad to help them however I can.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much. So folks, like you said, Bentley said, if you have any questions for your young adults, he's happy to help and advise with all of his wealth of experience. And Bentley, it was awesome to have you on the Degree Free podcast. An honor. Very excited to see how you do in November. Fingers crossed. There should be more people like you in the government. And if there were, then maybe we wouldn't be in this position. So thank you so much, though, for coming on and just sharing your amazing life story. And then also just giving really sound, inspiring advice to young adults and their parents for how they can navigate their journey of self-education and career.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.